Who has the clicker? Good morning, everyone. So, just so you know, I have a bit of I get anxious when speaking in front of a crowd. The dilemma is I also love speaking in front of a crowd, so it's an ongoing dilemma for me. My name is Mark Cassidy, and I'm here to talk to you today about something a term I've coined 10x Sitecore development. And what is that? So basically it's asking yourself some questions. See, that's the beauty of this talk. I'm here to get you to ask questions to yourselves, amongst yourselves. I'm not bringing any answers here. So that's easy. So how good is good enough? And when I ask that, it's like, how good does our code need to be? How good does our solution need to be? Are we gold plating too much? Are we engineering too much? How fast is fast enough? So this is about how quickly, what's acceptable? When a client comes to us and says, we want a Sitecore site, is it okay to say 6 months, 9 months, a year? And how do the clients respond to that? How flexible is flexible enough? So this is about how much change do we bake into our code base? How many interfaces, how many abstractions? Where are the pain points? How much of it do we really need? So yeah. And most importantly, all of this is a trade-off. And my talk today will hopefully get you thinking a little bit about how we manage these trade-offs inside our teams and try and put value where value is most needed. So yeah, that's it basically. Now, for those of you who don't know me, which would be a fair few, I think, and who am I to get on stage telling you to rethink how you build Sitecore? So I'm Danish. I've been working with Sitecore since 2005. Currently living in Switzerland. It's a long story. Probably done, I haven't tallied it up recently, but it's certainly 20,000 hours or so of Sitecore by now. You may have seen me on the Sitecore Stack Exchange. I'm the one who's closing your questions and giving you a hard time. I'm also co-pilot on the Unicorn and Rainbow projects, which I'm sure many of you know. So as you know, that's made by Cam Figgy, but he's now busy building JSS for all of us, so somebody has to take over. So I have a little bit of an idea what I'm talking about when I'm saying this is how we build Sitecore. So before we begin though, I want to point something out. This is feedback from having given this session before. Today I will be discussing building Sitecore in the traditional sort of MVC, rebuild it kind of way, because there are, as you know, 3 main entrances. I guess that's probably more, but the 3 main ones would be JSS is the up and coming, then the traditional MVC or web forms, and then SXA. So I'm not discussing SXA today. I'm not discussing JSS because I know nothing about it. So I'm discussing the traditional type of build. Now, to support everything I'm saying here, so I'm not just some guy on stage telling you, this is how you should do it. I asked myself the question about a year ago, how long does it actually take to build a Sitecore site? You know, bare bones. And I decided to find out, because I had an idea in my mind, but I figured I would need to try and prove that. Because if I came on stage telling you guys, you know, you're doing it wrong, it should only take this long, you'd throw me out of the room. You might still, but. So I basically sat down, I recorded it. I'm bringing that video with me today of a developer with some experience, me, basically doing what I call 10xing a Sitecore implementation. So I started from nothing. I use Sim because I love Sim. Put up a Sitecore 902. 9.1 was not out when I did this, and I'm not going to re-record that entire video. So we're sticking with that. Then I went to, I think it's called themes.bootstrap.com. Picked one of they have these pre-baked Bootstrap web templates. I picked one that seemed pretty appropriate. It's called Modern Business, you can look it up. Then me and my Visual Studio and nothing else got busy. And if you don't believe me, you will, but it's all on GitHub now. Full commit trail, everything. So yeah, you can start the video now. So you don't need to follow it in detail because it runs at 45 speed. So if you can't catch the minute details of it. But it's just basically everything that goes on from nothing and then getting this done. So when we're talking about build time, I'm not talking about project time. I'm not talking about all the pre-sales, all the preparation, all the design discussions, none of that. So just basically, now we're done, we're ready to go, get some Sitecore developers, let's get this thing done. Now, if I ask you, I mean, many of you come from partners and agencies, I know, how long does a Sitecore build implementation take? How many here delivered a site in recent times in 3 months or less? Okay. 6 months or less? And more than 6 months? Okay. So it's pretty even spread. Has anyone done it in, say, 2 weeks? 4 weeks? Okay. So good thing you're joining me here this morning. Have you ever been asked, now how many here has been asked by a client, oh, we need a component with an HTML field on where they can put anything in, unrestricted. How many here has had that request? 80, 70%, 80%? Yeah, it's a pretty common requirement. And the last one, you can't lie to me on this one. How many have had a Sitecore implementation have the marketing features, all the cool stuff pushed into phase 2? Yeah, so have I. Now, what do these 3 questions have in common? Well, they all go towards the time to market point, which is sort of the point I'm going to try and make here today. The customer wants an HTML field because they work with an agency that can do a little cookie pop-up banner or whatever, injected via GTM or injected via whatever, and they will send over some HTML that the person in charge of the Sitecore stuff will just basically paste into that field, and you're basically being completely bypassed here, which is annoying when it happens, but it's also very understandable because the time to market on that would be 1-2 hours, as opposed to a developer and a continuous integration cycle and deployment every 2 weeks and whatever else is common. As for phase 2, well, my guess would be that it's because we spend all the money. So they have to push stuff to phase 2 because we're taking too damn long, to build. That's at least my conclusion from it. Now, when what started me off on this talk was I saw this. Well, you've probably all seen the Gartner quadrant at some point in your life. Sitecore pushes it quite heavy. So this one is not the current one. This is from December 2017. I haven't actually checked if this has updated significantly, but this is what set me off on coming up with this talk that I'm here giving you today. Because that was the first time I saw Sitecore not being in the top right area of that quadrant. I was like, what's going on here? And then I took a closer look at the report. And the 3 main issues with Sitecore was, usability for business users. Sitecore has a few usability challenges, I would say, and that's fine. This is being addressed with upcoming releases, so fine. Service and support, there were some complaints about that. That's also being addressed by Sitecore's new services. But what really got to me was this. Several Sitecore customers reported higher than expected total cost of ownership because of unforeseen complexity in implementation. Unforeseen complexity. That's us. I'm sorry, that's us. That's us. We built the sites. Why are they complicated? Why is this such a hassle? Yeah, well, part of it is that developing Sitecore, there's a lot of stuff that you potentially need to know. I've just taken whatever I could brainstorm in like a couple of minutes to create a little workout here, but these are just some of the terms that a Sitecore developer to some extent will touch upon in their Sitecore career, or, you know, and I'm sure if your favorite isn't there, I'm sorry. Mail it to me or whatever. I'll make sure if I update the slide ever, then I get it in. Now, that's one aspect of it. So this is a technology. And of course, to build sites, you need developers. And as many new agencies certainly will find, these are few and far between. There's not that many, there's certainly not enough skilled Sitecore developers out there that can do all of this stuff, that can set up a site with Helix and Glassmapper and GDS and whatever. You know, all these things that also affect our build. So what do we do about that? Well, one approach goes that, well, we just need to train them more. Send them on advanced training, send them on Helix training, take training in this, take training in that, and you know, get good attitude, which is fine. I'm here to try and flip that coin a bit. I say maybe we need to go the other way. Maybe we need to engineer less. Yakin, everybody familiar with that? You aren't going to need it. Don't try and build stuff in that you're not going to need yet. And know that that carousel component is never going to draw its data source from floppy disk on an AS400 somewhere. You don't need that abstraction. It's going to come from Sitecore. And it's fine to build in that assumption. And then lastly, a little bit about division of work. The way our Jira tickets, I mean, all of us work off some Jira or some case of issue management system. And the way I see these tickets often is, we need a free text search on our page. And that becomes a ticket that somehow flows through the system. Problem is implementing a free text search requires quite extensive knowledge of Solar, maybe some Ajax or whatever, some front-end technology, some faceting. There's quite an extensive tool set. So maybe the person who knows about Solar isn't the person who's also pretty good at front-end stuff to make the input controls nice. And maybe the Sitecore work of this could be just done by someone less experienced who's still learning Sitecore. So to make it simple, the rule I normally follow, I've been training a lot of developers in my time. So I didn't mention this, I'm a freelance consultant, and I often get hired by agencies who need either extra hands, right? Or they need somebody to come in and help them build an efficient Sitecore team. So where I start is I normally try and iterate this rule, make it simple. When you're building one component, you will have one data source template, you will have one controller, you will have one view. These days it's a Razor view, but it used to be web forms, and before that XSLTs. Yes, I'm that old. A model, placeholder setting, blah, blah, blah. So basically, keep it simple. Don't worry about anything else in your solution. You don't know it yet, and you don't need to know it yet. You are here to build this call to action, flashy thing because Someone in marketing wants it, needs it by tomorrow. And we simply don't have time to bring you up to speed on everything else that's going on in the solution. Nor should you. Just get at it. Keep it simple. And the way that looks in my world is that my views don't know anything about Sitecore. I'm getting a lot of feedback on the specific code here. This is not meant as an example of how you should be coding necessarily. It's just the principle of the view doesn't know anything about Sitecore, and then if I ever do the follow-up talk I have planned for this presentation, I will get into more detail on that. But that's a view, that's a model, nothing fancy. And the controller. Now for those of you who forgot, this is what the native Sitecore API looks like. And it's boring, it's really boring actually, there's nothing fancy going on. But the thing about the Sitecore API is that it's stable. Now I wrote 10 to 12 years, so I'm getting old and my memory fading a bit. In my mind, Sitecore 6.6 was released in, I thought 2009 or so. Turns out it was released in 2014, so it was only off by 5 years. But it doesn't really change. I mean, those of you who have been around long enough, I have code running today that I could probably get compiling on Sitecore 5.2 or 5.3, whichever switch to .NET Framework 2. Now, is that relevant? No, it's not really. But my point is, if you stick with the native Sitecore API and you keep it simple, then your code becomes more flexible, or at least more portable, I should say. Now, it's inherently fast. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you can put mappers on and you can do caches and whatever, but inevitably, going straight to the API is about the fastest you can go. It's easy. I know it's ugly, because the API is old, and Sitecore has stuck to the idea of keeping it backward compatible. So it means that some of the ugliness of it will stay ugly. And I like ugly in this case. So Sitecore fields, I mean string, link field, reference field, image field, multi-list fields are possibly one or two more. Once you have these down cold, you're fine, you're set. And this is what they teach you. When you do Sitecore basic training, they're not going to teach you anything else. They're going to teach you how the native API works, which also means that if you get freshly minted developers out and you keep it simple for them, they can actually contribute in a meaningful way to your Sitecore project without messing things up. And the reason they can't mess things up is because of the one-to-one thing. They're not touching anything else. And they're not misunderstanding anything else. They own their little bit, and that's fine. So, the build you see running, how far are we on that? Let's see. I need to get down here. Okay. So we're 9.5 hours in now. So in this modern website, modern business website, sorry, there are 25 components. I focused on doing the ones that I would expect a freshly minted Sitecore developer to be able to do with just minimum instruction. Nothing fancy going on, so there's no Solar, there's none of that. It's just the basic content components. Which means the contact form wasn't implemented, because that would require Sitecore forms, and that is not something I would necessarily expect from someone who came out of training a couple of days ago. But the rest of it is very straightforward. So there's 25 components in total. And if you look at that list, I hope it's big enough for everyone to read. Top navigation, header, marketing items, breadcrumb, image header, jumbotron. I'm sure we've all done dozens of these by now. I know I have, so, and I don't think the sites I work on are particularly different. So they may have different names, but they're still the same. Most of these are just simple call to actions, and then there's a few navigation components. and a few listing pages. So this was all done in 625 lines of code. This is counting using statements and empty lines and everything. It's just 625 lines of raw code. So the lowest lines of code in the component was the image header. Came out of a dazzling 16 lines of code. And the highest was the portfolio, which is sort of like a product sort of thing. Came out at 97 lines of code. I have in this solution one layout, which is what you should have, you should have, I guess I should say, one layout per device, I think is the official recommendation. I have 25 components. I only have 23 controllers and 23 razor views. This is where I'm breaking my one-to-one-to-run rule, and that's because there was, I don't know if you noticed, but there was a 2 and a 3 and a 4 column portfolio listing page. They did the same thing. They output the same HTML. It was just a class that changed, and for that I wouldn't religiously go create another view for that. Just for the curious, what I did there is I have the same controller and 3 different or 4 different index methods that just changed that one class name, and then that was it. So because I have a life and a business and whatever, I couldn't actually build this site in one go. I had to sort of work my day job, then work a few hours in the evening, and as it turned out, it's Saturday and Sunday. And so I built it over 3 days, but not 3 full days. And so just to break down what my time was spent on, I didn't actually keep a record, but since I recorded the entire session, it was easy enough to figure out how much time I spent. You may not see that in the time lapse because it's so quick, but I obviously know what's going on, so I just, 90 minutes in, I was done installing Sitecore, downloading the theme, setting up the project, extracting all the assets, so it comes with some CSS and some Bootstrap and whatever. Initial layout, which is just basically taking the Bootstrap theme layout file and putting it into Sitecore, setting a few placeholders up. And then I started analyzing the HTML because I hadn't seen the HTML before either. I wanted to keep this as real as possible. So I started looking, and you know how it is, if you get a site with a lot of HTML pages, so here's the product page and here's the whatever page, and you have to sort of go back on that and break it down into components again. So that's what the analysis was for. I basically started listing out all the components. Then I spent 4.5 hours on Sitecore admin stuff, or whatever you want, Sitecore IA, I like to call it. So that's creating thumbnails of all the components, setting up the blank view or static HTML view files, doing the Sitecore IA, so that's setting up the component definition, data source templates empty for now, placeholder settings, empty controllers, empty modules, just all the housekeeping. This part could probably be automated using maybe Jacob's Pathfinder, which is sort of a tool that takes raw data and creates Sitecore architecture from it. That's a longer story though. But it would only save me 4.5 hours, so it's not the end of the world. Then I spent an hour setting up all the pages. So the Bootstrap theme I downloaded came with 8 or so pages, I think. And I just basically recreated all of those in Sitecore with adding the components to empty pages, setting up the data sources, still all static HTML, but then I had the option of just comparing side by side the original template versus what my Sitecore solution was outputting. So yeah, 6 hours it took me to code the whole thing. This is actual coding. This is doing the Sitecore stuff, creating the fields for the data source templates, creating the binding code, outputting that, all the stuff we do when we actually say we're doing Sitecore development. And One thing you will note if you study the video closer is I didn't deploy once doing that. Don't deploy too often, especially not if you're going to Experience Editor, because I think it's safe to say everybody feels it starts up a little bit too slowly. So don't do that. If you code it this simple, you don't need to start your site all the time. All you're doing is, mapping fields to properties on a model, more or less. 90 minutes of bug fixing, half an hour of which was some very annoying accordion that in no way it behaved the way I thought it behaved. But that has never happened to anyone before doing SUGCON. Now put your mind to the video for a short second, because we're about to reach the conclusion. Done. So just under 15 hours is what it took to build a Sitecore site. Ready to go, Experience Editor compatible. Does everything you expect. Doesn't do any advanced stuff. So I had a comment from someone, I guess you didn't need content search or whatever it was. No, because there's no search on the template I downloaded. But that's also not the point. I know that the sites we build are usually more advanced than this. But what I am saying is this is stuff you can get a reasonably fresh Sitecore developer doing without actually ruining the Sitecore solution. So the breakdown, I don't know if the font is large enough for everyone, but so download analysis, 90 minutes, Sitecore IA, 270 minutes, test pages, etc., 60 minutes, development, 360 minutes, so 6 hours, bug fixing, 90 minutes, some EE adjustments at the end. That was the first time I started Experience Editor, and there was like a few things, actually I need to do this slightly differently. So that's the amount of time. Now my point is this, or actually rather I should say, my point is not to come here and tell you, look, this is how fast I can build Sitecore. No, this is actually how fast you can build Sitecore. And I'm not here to say that you need to do it my way or whatever. I don't have all the answers. What I want you to realize is that this is the baseline. Right? I mean, we're literally talking 20 minutes per component, where I see estimates of 3 or 4 or 5 days coming back out in the real world. And we need to realize that whatever the difference is between the baseline and the reality has to add value to the client. And given that, in my experience, time to market is one of the highest, most valuable things to our clients. I would argue that. Then we need to look a little bit closer at how can we get faster to market without compromising everything else. And I don't necessarily know how to do that, but I know that the system that I normally apply when I do Sitecore can do it in 15 hours, and you can argue some details of it, and I'm happy to debate that with you afterwards. But it's still a baseline that is significantly lower. I mean, nobody came up on even 4 weeks here. And that's what 10x development is. So 10x is a term coined by a guy called Steve McConnell. Some of you may recognize the name. He wrote the book Code Complete. That's probably what he's most known for. But if you don't, it's fine. He has been discussing a phenomenon for a long time, where he says there's a 10x, so there's a 10 times factor of difference in productivity between a very routine developer and the opposite, whatever that would be, unroutine. Sorry, I'm not English by nature, so I don't know. But you know what I mean, right? And he says there's the factor is 10 times. And why is that? And he doesn't know either. But I think it has something to do with simplicity. Now, this is the bonus. For those of you who might have seen this talk before, I decided to put my screenshots where my mouth is or whatever. So I said not long ago the Sitecore API is stable. It hasn't changed significantly in 10 to 12 years. And I still believe that, but I wanted to try it out anyway. So I decided to try that. So what you saw was built on Sitecore 902 or 901, was it? Anyway, not really relevant. I decided to package that up, all the items and templates and whatever, and I started deploying it. So I'm a bit of a geek. I have every Sitecore version ever released in a local repository. And me and Sim are good friends, so I decided to fire up Sitecore instances and just see how far I could backport this. Now, you would never backport in real life, but if I can backport it, you could also have forward ported it. Right? Upgrading is a major challenge in every project I've ever been in. How does this style of coding change that? So here it is on Sitecore 8.2 update 7, which is not a big jump. From 9.01 or 2 to 8.2 update 7, there was literally I don't think there was any changes. Here we see it on 8.0. This was a little bit of a pain, because 8.0 was not Sitecore's finest hour. And so I had some challenges. The challenges, so what I had to do was I didn't change any code, but I was struggling. I'm an idiot with this, I know, but the MVC frameworks and the web configs you need to set up and the assembly bindings for that version of MVC was driving me nuts. And thanks to Marek Michalak, are you here? Thanks for helping me out there. Because that's just .NET, and I'm not really, I got certified in .NET web development in 2006, so I think it's safe to say it's not relevant anymore. Anyway, so let's go back. Here's 7.2, update 6. And it's still running. I had to make 2 changes. So get media URL, so the hashing utils protect asset URL that was introduced somewhere in the 8 series, I forgot where. That doesn't exist in Sitecore 7, so I sort of commented that out. And then, thank you very much, Sitecore is page editor was changed to is experience editor for no apparent reason. And well, there was a reason, obviously, but I don't necessarily agree that this should be breaking change. But so I changed 2 lines of code, and now I'm back on a release that is 3 or 4 years old. I don't actually know when 7.2 update 6 was released. But I didn't stop there. The earliest version of Sitecore that supports officially MVC is 6.6 update 8. How much do you think I needed to change to make it run on that?
0.
Well, I had to change one thing. The get friendly URL was introduced somewhere in the Sitecore series that basically generates a good URL from a link field. Now I cheated like a dog here, because that's what we used to do, lf.url, but if you look up, I think Brian Peterson has a blog post on it where he's sort of half covering what you need to do with mail-to links and JavaScript links and whatever. I just ignored all of that, because the chances that any of you will be putting a new site on Sitecore 6.6 update 8, I hope is fairly slim. Otherwise, give me a call, we'll sort it out. So in total, 3 lines of code were changed, going from 901 or 902 back to 6.6 version update 8. And I could probably have taken it further back, but I don't know, I couldn't remember how we got MVC working on Sitecore 6.4 and whatever. There were some distributables. I need Karen Haskin or someone. Besides, I think the point is made, yeah. The code is reasonably portable. Apart from the MVC Razor struggles, I had no issues backporting it. It was all done over a couple of hours. So that's something. The API is reasonably stable. So the site, does it, is it, whatever, how is this possible? Well, is it finished? No. Let's just be clear on that, because everybody, when we deliver a site, There's some Google meta tags, there's some Facebook OG tags, whatever. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to go in, sitemaps and whatever. None of that is part of this build. So you could not consider it complete, but you could reasonably say that freshly minted Sitecore developers could have built this, while more experienced, the limited resource, experienced Sitecore developers would have built the rest. Or in some agencies, you would have this pre-baked, how you handle sitemaps, how you handle this, that. So it's not finished per se. 15 hours is not the entire truth, but yeah. Is it Helix? Nick, are you here? It's not Helix. It's not Helix the way you look at Habitat. If you download Habitat and think that's what Helix is supposed to look like, first of all, you're wrong. Second of all, no, the project doesn't look like that in any way. I have done nothing outside the project layer of Helix for this project. I personally don't consider a carousel a feature. I would consider a component that can have multiple, that handles multiple inputs from maybe children of the data source item or shared from a global repository or taken from search. That would be a feature I would extract, but I haven't for this project. But the fact of the matter is, without further requirements, there wouldn't be a need for more layers. So is it Helix? Yeah, it is. I mean, it checks all the boxes. It just doesn't look like, I guess, what most of you, or many of you, would expect. What about the experience editor? Well, I think, well, I say anyway, that as a starting point, Sitecore has two main interfaces currently. The content editor, which is really good at handling content, and the experience editor, which is really good at handling the experience. And I don't think you should rule either of them out. Your site needs to be workable from the experience editor, and when you add a new call to action, it should be reasonably easy to change the image, change the headline, change the button text. I'm all for that. Do I go overboard in creating a fantastic UI for handling the carousel? No. No, I don't. You go edit the related item, and then you set up your slides in the content editor because the content editor is better suited. Now, I know many of you build special things for this. That's a discussion I would rather have with the client once I have a site in their hands. Because once you have the site there and it's working, and they can do whatever they want with it, then we can get to the details of, can we make it easier, or could you prefer to work with it this way? Well, that's fine, but do that after the site is built. Then they can make the trade-off. Do you want phase 2? Or do you want to do this fancy with the experience editor, which is going to make upgrading even harder? Sorry, that was biased, but yeah. Would it not have been quicker on SXA? That's all I'm going to mention. I don't know. I only spent 6 hours developing. You still need to analyze, and making SXA eat up this template that I downloaded. There was a guy, I forgot his name. There was one who tried it. And he said, no, it's not going to be faster. Should you have built this site on SXA? Yes, I believe that. But that's not the point. That's not the point I'm making today, because most of what we do is still traditional Sitecore builds. SXA, for a lot of reasons, is not the first choice. I believe it probably should be, but it's not, and that's the reality I live with. And that's your reality as well. So, yeah. So kudos to Adam still, if you're here. But, yeah. So, Nick didn't actually say that. No, it's just a bit of a thing, because the approach is so different, and it goes into different, I say architect less, build less, develop less. Come on, let's get this in the hands of our customers and then discuss the finer points of architecture. Sitecore, by nature, I mean, we can laugh at it now, but these guys seriously believed back in 04 or whatever, that they would have a data structure, and then business users would just get HTML, and then they would somehow model that together using XSLT. And that obviously didn't work, and it's easy to laugh in hindsight, but the idea of Sitecore was actually always a rapid, let's get going rapidly, quickly, get a site up there. And the reality of Sitecore currently is the exact opposite. it takes forever. And I don't know why. Well, I know why, to some extent, but I want you to think about that, or would like for you to think about that, sorry. And yeah, that's it. Questions? We have 4 minutes or so. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. I've given this talk a number of times, and afterwards I always get like, oh, I wish you were the team lead at our company, because our team lead insists that so and so. Feel free to reach out. I will gather all these comments, and I will try and address them over the course of this year in some additional blog post or whatever. But until then, I just want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank the tech team down there for being great, because videos, and here's me with all my special requirements, and thank you all for your time this morning. Sorry?
Sorry.
Oh, that's a question.
Sorry, hi, yeah. You say perhaps it would have been preferable to start with SXA, but as requirements move on with an end client, would you start to maybe start with SXA and then move on to a more traditional MVC approach, or would you carry on with SXA?
I would probably carry on. I have to be very upfront. I've never built a site on SXA, but I know enough about it to be dangerous to go and say stuff like this. But I would stay on SXA.
I have no
Yeah.
experience, so that's where my question came.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, no, that's somebody with a phone, sorry.
That's allowed.
Yes, Nick.
Nick has a question.
Actually, I'll just grab a quick, if you guys don't mind. This is the biggest crowd I've ever spoken in front of, and I survived somehow.
Hey, Mark. How about doing 10x development with TDS?
I seriously don't think that would make it any harder. As such, I mean, I obviously used Unicorn for this, but all I really did was keep my items serialized, and I'm sure TDS will manage just fine. So.
What do you think the effect of actually having a customer in the process would actually do to that 10 times speed? 15 hours?
Well, I mean, every situation differs, right? But in my experience, or certainly when I get called to help on a build, the design is already there, somebody has already made the HTML, now the customer just wants it live. And I would actually keep the customer, this sounds really rude, I would keep the customer out of the loop, because this can be done so quickly. Let's say not 15 hours, but let's say a week. And then you come back with them, okay, here's your site on Sitecore. Now let's discuss these advanced features.
It's mostly just because they order an apple and then want a banana.
But I would hope that the design they gave us is the one they want implemented.
Mark, based on your quite rich experience, can you name, just based again on your experience, 3 most time wasters that blocks your development?
Waiting for Experience Editor to start. Waiting for the debugger to, don't debug your code, seriously. If you have doubts about your code, fix it in the code, don't find it in the debugger unless you absolutely have to. And the last one, don't customize Sitecore unless you absolutely have to. Stay away from that. It's a trap.
Any other takers?
You should do it in a bar with a beer in hand.
I'm up for that. All right, okay. I think we're done, yeah?
Brilliant. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you again.